Well, welcome everyone to our session on how to bring PBIS and restorative practices to online classrooms. I'm Laura Mooiman, and I am actually calling you from very far away. I live in the Netherlands now. So I've been working at Taylor, I guess I'd say, for about a year on PBIS and restorative practices with them. And I came to your district because I used to work with Ivan Chaidez in Napa. So he was a director there, and we worked closely together. And I was the PBIS Restorative Practices and Mental Health Administrator. I managed all the wellness programs there for 10 years. And before that, I guess I was a school social worker. I've been in schools for about 22 years. I've done a little bit in probation, child protective services, private practice. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, so I have the whole clinical side of things as well. And so I'm just really glad to be here today. And I kind of talked back and forth with Oscar about what you guys would like to hear about. And what we landed on was just how do we adapt a lot of the things that you already have been doing. You guys have been doing PBIS as a school district for a really long time, which is fantastic. And not many districts have had that commitment, that long-term commitment that Oak Grove has had. We had that in Napa as well. But it's really a wonderful thing. Adding that layer of restorative practices, we're going to talk about that today because that's going to bring us that sense of community with our students even when we're online. And so we're just really looking at how do we adapt all of the things we already know to an online classroom, to distance learning. So that's what we're going to do today. So in this session, you're going to look at combining PBIS and restorative practices, which are really in the US and internationally, it really is kind of the big school climate initiatives for different reasons. And they both are incredibly impactful for students. So Oak Grove has embraced really evidence-based practices to make your school safe, positive, and restorative. And by adopting these programs, certainly PBIS has been, I think, more of a focus for you guys. From what I understand, I've talked a little bit at Anderson and Taylor, and I've toured some of the middle schools. I went and visited with Oscar last year. And so really what we're going to look at today is how do we prevent problem behavior in online learning by using some of the things we know with PBIS, like establishing expectations, routines, and procedures. How do we create a positive classroom environment when we can't see and touch and hear these kids in person? By using like a positive reinforcement system. How can that work when you don't have paper tickets anymore or points in your classroom and things like that, those of you that are used to that? And then how do we respond when there's challenging behavior? Because in PBIS, we say we should have consistent consequences that are like low level, intervene early with effective interventions, right? But how do you do that when you're online? And then how do you build community? And I probably should put that one first, but this is the order that we're getting it in today. But really, those are the keys that we're going to talk about today. So before we get started, so these are the four, just so that you can see kind of the order we're going to go. So we're going to talk first about what research tells us makes an effective classroom and an effective school, therefore an online classroom. Establishing expectations, establishing a positive reinforcement system that you can use with your students, consistent consequences, and what this could look like. I've heard all kinds of stories about ways that people are trying to work with kids that are misbehaving, and it's everything from humorous to tragic, right? And then build community. How do we have relationships with kids when we can't hug them anymore and smile in their eyes, right? So that's how we're going to approach it. So before we get started, I want to make sure the chat box works. So what we're going to be doing is in the chat box, could you tell me what is the worst thing about being quarantined? And I'm going to open my chat so I can read all of your funny answers and not so funny answers. What's the worst thing? Yes, we're missing our friends. Isolation. Yeah, canceling travel. Believe me, I haven't been able to see my mother. It's horrible. Yeah, sense of humor. That is hard online. Constant cleaning. Yeah. No travel and the mask. Oh, hugging. Donna, I love it. I'm with you. Great. Okay. Next question, you guys. Fires. Yeah, that was horrible that you guys had that. Now, what's the best thing? Dawn, are you going to say being with your husband 24/7? Saving on gas. That's right. Commuting. That's true, Ashley. That's true when you're a teacher. You can't pee when you want to. Good. Nice. Books. I know I've read a lot of books. Great. Oh, this is so great. So we know to everything there's positive and negative. Oh, that's good. I think in some ways we're going to look back at this time and have, kind of nostalgia of the days that we were home and with our families, and it's been really tricky. It has. Valerie. But you never know. You never know how we feel about it. Yeah, these are really tough times, and so we're going to adapt everything that we know. And what I love about you guys is you chose to be here today. So you're probably already the kind of people that are doing amazing things with your students. So let's just assume that's true, and know that we're going to see if there's anything that we can do that's if there's anything you can glean from today and from each other. We're going to do a little bit of breakouts and discussion at a certain point, but mainly we're going to stay together and just look at reflecting on our own practices. Okay, and some of it's going to be like we already do that, which is great. Other things we're going to look at getting better at. Okay, so let's get started. Establishing expectations. Very first thing you do when you roll out PBIS, right? But what we're not doing is this. This is Mrs. Molnar, and she likes to go over a few of her rules on the first day of school. So, can I get a few people to text what is your, in the message box, what's your favorite here that you're seeing? I like the not crying during tests. What do you guys like? What's your favorite? Mrs. Molnar. No biting, yeah. No dorky hairstyles. I like the no, yeah, no coming in late, no coming in early. And to be honest, when we were in school, all of us, most likely, this is what school was like. That big list of don't do this, don't do that. That list, like when you'd walk onto a school campus and they'd have that metal board, pasted to the chain link fence that would say no skateboards, no hats, no cursing. Like that list that's so negatively framed for an adolescent, particularly, becomes that list of what they need to do to be acknowledged at this school. And the research has been really clear that schools that are punitive like this and focus on the negative actually have the highest rates of suspension, expulsion, vandalism, truancy, and aggression. So what we've learned, and that's a lot of the research that PBIS is based in, is that being positive, yes, I see that, McGuire, no passing gas, that's right. But they can do that in online learning. They only bother themselves. So what we're looking at here is a change from how we were raised, right, into being more explicit about expectations and stating them positively. And that's what PBIS has really brought to us, because we know that having very clear school-wide and classroom expectations helps us be less reactive. And when we're less reactive with students, that means that it lowers everybody's anxiety. When we're predictable, and we're consistent, particularly for at-risk kids, kids that have been through trauma, but really all kids, it helps them feel safe at our school. It helps them feel like we're reliable. It also keeps all of you being consistent, means that you're not the mean teacher, right? You're just upholding the expectation that is for the whole school. So if we walk in the hallway and you ask a kid to stop, they're going to stop and not argue with you. When you have schools with a lot of arguing students, it's probably because your staff are not consistent with an expectation. So that's why we want to do it. It's really better for kids and it's better for you. You don't get a lot of arguing. Kids tend to follow directions when we're consistent. That tends to be just a better situation for everyone. So an effective expectation is going to be positively stated. And that means we say walk please instead of don't run. We say cell phones away rather than no cell phones, right? You just say it in a positive way. And that's not because we just like to be touchy-feely and nice. It's true that it feels better to have a positive expectation listed, but it's also easier to follow. Our brains actually can follow do requests better than don't requests. So if you ask a kid, say, don't run while they're running, their brain hears run, don't, she looks mad, I should stop, right? But if you say walk, please, cell phones away, please, their brain is already halfway to doing it before they realize, what's happened. And so that's what we don't want, that cognitive load of asking a kid to translate what we're saying or saying things in anger. So that's what we're looking at. You also want to post things in your online classroom as much as you can. So this can be different things in your Google Classroom with expectations. You can send things home to parents. You can have an activity where kids, explore these expectations together. And then you need to teach your expectations to kids 20 times a year, 10 to 20. Now, our expectations, what's kind of different is they're just different expectations than they used to be. You're doing all kinds of things about muting mics and keeping your cameras on, and what does being on time and ready mean? Are we still in bed and in PJs? Are we sitting in a learning space? Right? So those kind of expectations need to be taught to the kids regularly. 10 to 20 times a year is the research. You want to have positive reinforcement from every adult that the kid interacts with. These need to be consistent across your school. So a lot of you guys have had expectations for just your class, but do you have something school-wide is really the question. And whatever expectations you have for your class really need to echo your school-wide expectations. So if you guys are be safe, be respectful, be responsible, if that's your school motto, school expectations, that's what your classroom should be. That also helps kids just transfer. That means all the adults are reinforcing the same behaviors. And that's what we know about effective behavioral expectations. That's the research. So how can that look here? So here's a high school expectation matrix that, just a sample of one. So you guys, this should look familiar. You should have a little emoji thing where you can give me a thumbs up. If this looks familiar to you, you have one of these for your school, right? An expectation matrix that you teach the kids what you expect off of this tool. And so, good. I got some comments here in the chat. Good. I'm glad. So what we're looking for is, you should, as a teacher, the 35 of you, this should be old news. Like, if you've not seen this, that's kind of problematic, unless it's like your first year teaching at this school and they didn't show it to you, right? So this should be something that you've seen posted, that's in the kids' handbooks, that goes home to parents possibly, or at least you have posters around the school with these divided up. Like, classrooms have the classrooms, the bathrooms have the bathroom expectations. This should look familiar. But what we need to do with distance learning is we need to adapt this so that we have an online matrix. And this is not to do right now, but I'm just curious, has anyone seen something like this for your school? So do you have an expectation matrix for all these things? How to log in? What do classroom discussions? How do we be safe, respectful, responsible in class discussions? Yeah, I wish. That's right. What is group work supposed to look like now, right? What is homework? How do we turn it in? What does that look like? How do you want them to ask for help? All of these things should be kind of codified in a matrix. And that's something that the schools that I'm working with, it really is. I know it feels kind of judgy or structured, but I really believe before you start building community and doing all these lovely things, we need to be clear on what are the parameters, what are we doing, right? And so that's why a matrix is golden for you. It really does help everyone get on the same page, because think about it this way. You have kids that they have, families have multiple children at your school. Parents need to know the expectations. The more you can align yourselves with all the other teachers, if you have some teachers that are allowing like on time is a 15-minute window, whereas someone else is being like on time is camera on, mic on at this time, that's inconsistent, and you're not going to get great outcomes because of that. So what I've been working on with a lot of schools is developing an online classroom behavior expectation matrix. Think about taking that model that I gave you and making it for your school, okay? So ideally, what you would do to create this is you would get these expectations, you get student input, you state them positively, specific, you display them, and then you teach them. That's really the lineup of what we need to do with this. So getting input, this may be new. If you are a school that's looking at integrating restorative practices into your PBIS work, that means you're doing community circles, like classroom circles. And what you do in those, and we're going to talk about those at the end of the session, that was that blue, the fourth one. We're going to be looking at how do we share ownership, because it's really tempting in PBIS to have like two people sit in a staff room and just make all the rules for the school. But that's not restorative and that's not honoring the community. And so really what we need to do is talk about it as a class. And even if your school is not embarking on this, as a class, you can get your kids to really talk about how do we want to treat each other in this class? What are our expectations together? And that's also called a fair process, because fair process means that everyone's input is taken into account. We also have expectation clarity is fair, and engagement in making decisions is fair. And so that's really what we're looking for, is helping people feel like the rules are fair. And if you think about it, anytime that you have to follow a rule, like wearing masks or whatever, right, it helps us to follow rules when we're involved in the decision than when things are done to us. So if you want students to follow expectations, involve them in creating them. And so you just think about, how do we, making agreements on what does it look like to be engaged in learning. We have our cameras on. How are we sitting up? How are we engaging? But also, how do we interact? How do they use the chat box with each other? All of those things can be discussed when you make rules and expectations together. Being positive, like we said, we're going to tell them what to do, not what not to do. So that's that less cognitive load. It's going to make it more positive, and they're more likely to follow it if you tell them what to do. All right. And then you want it to be really specific. So if you're explaining like how you want them to ask for help, what does that look like? What does that sound like? Have them practice using the hand up emoji if that's what you're going to have them do. Or maybe you're going to have like I've seen some teachers have hand signals, right? Like this means I need help. This means I agree, right? Whatever. So they need to know exactly what it looks like and sounds like. Give them examples and non-examples. Non-examples are good when you're talking about how do we interact. We've had lots of situations about kids being really mean in the chats privately to each other. You're an idiot. That was a stupid answer, right? We've had some of that kind of stuff. So you give examples of what you don't want to see and what you do want to see. Post them where students can see them. I know you have other ways of posting things. Creating some sort of visual reminder is really helpful. And it's that third point reference. So if you need to work with a kid on how they're behaving, isn't that nice to say, hey, let's look at this document together. I'm going to put it on my screen. Can we talk about this? Right? That way we're looking at that and it's not that like I'm staring you down over Zoom. Let's talk about the classroom expectation matrix and where do you think you're doing well and why do you think we're talking? What are these? Are you not doing so good today? And that's fine. And you want to teach them. So we're talking about teaching at the beginning of the year, and you really should be talking about expectations every week. And that's what one of the researchers that I've really actually become close friends with is Jeff Sprague, and he was like one of the original University of Oregon professors that invented PBIS, and he said you should be talking about behavior every week, at least. And if you're a kindergarten teacher or young grades, you guys talk about behavior, every 2 minutes, right? And so we have to continue to talk a lot about how we expect people to behave, teach reasons for the rule, encourage a lot of discussion, and then practice together. So that's the right way to teach school-wide expectations. All right, so in the chat box, what rules do you know are school-wide for like distance learning, kind of along the lines of what I was saying? Like maybe you guys all have the same login, or maybe you're all using at least Google Meet, or you're all using Zoom. Is there some commonalities? Any school-wide expectations? So I'm going to be looking in the chat and see what people have. So some people have hand signals they're using. Okay, Google Meet, good. Keep your mic muted unless it's your turn to speak. Good. And so as far as you guys know, these things are fairly consistent. Good. Good. Yeah, that part's good. Excellent. All right. So now, what are some of your own expectations, whether they're the same or not? What do you expect that might be different than the things people have been listing? Something more specific, perhaps, an expectation you have in your class. Okay, what do you guys have? Nice. So you're encouraging your kids to leave cameras on? Good. I do too. I feel like we need it. Good. Oh, okay. Fist to five for understanding. I love that. Yeah, some teachers don't like kids eating if possible. So Brenna, you'll have to, when you teach them, I'm sure you tell them exactly what the inappropriate things are, right? Rather than saying, but yeah, for conciseness, I'm sure you're saying that. Online timers for breaks. Great. Keep camera on. Good. Okay. I like the polls. That's wonderful. Good. Do you feel that there are consistencies for the most part, is there consistency between your classroom and your school? And this is kind of a yes, no, or sort of answer. Okay, Sarah says no. Hi, Sarah. It's been a while. I know Sarah. No, okay. Yeah, sort of. Okay. I mean, the Google Meet is a good part. That part is good because that means all families, it's easier for them. Yeah. So, not a lot of consistency there. And that's the trick. So the task really now, and we're not doing this moment, but to take away with you is, could you as a school create an online classroom expectation matrix? You'll look at the one in the handout. Can you translate that and make a school-wide one? Okay. And then make some sort of plan to share it with your team, to make, make a plan for getting input from parents and buy-in from parents and kids, and sharing that out. And then, of course, teaching it to the kids. I have like some schools, like high schools, that they're doing, like classroom meetings on Monday, and they'll teach a new expectation that week, and they just loop them. So logging in, they'll revisit it after a few weeks. Same with elementary. They just talk about school-wide types of expectations and classroom expectations regularly. And you should have a pacing schedule like you did before. Okay? So that's our PBIS. All right? So the next thing that we do is we have a positive reinforcement system. And this is really tricky for people to figure out how to do online. And so I actually made a short video that I'm going to show you because I do funny things in it. And it's easier than me trying to do it right now. So I'm going to show you what that is in a sec. But what we want to do is positive reinforcement, technically speaking, is something provided contingent on a behavior that increases the likelihood that it's going to occur again. So if it's not making the behavior better, it's not positive reinforcement. You can let it go. There may be something different you could do or something better you can do, or it's the way you're doing it, okay? So that can be like a troubleshooting thing. But really what we're looking for is social bonding. And this is kind of a wordy slide, but the research about attachment and bonding is very powerful. And the idea behind it is that by having a lot of positive interactions with kids, it socially bonds you and attaches you to them. And it actually improves behavior because they so badly want to be part of that positive experience. Even now, I'm seeing a lot of kids that are so isolated, they want to be in class, even if it's difficult for them. And so by increasing these moments of social bonding, it's actually going to improve behavior. So we're going to show a little video. And I have to keep my sound on, so I'll be very quiet. But it's like a 8-minute, but you're gonna see some examples of some online classroom ideas for, and this is just, I have a YouTube channel I can share with you at the end, so you can find my, just look my name in YouTube and you'll see it, Laura Mooiman. All right, here we go. We're gonna watch this real quick. Whether teaching in person or online, it's important to build relationships in positive regard in your classroom. One fun and effective way to do this is to have a plan for providing frequent positive feedback to students. In this new virtual learning environment, make sure that you reinforce students as they follow guidelines for success and demonstrate good behavior. We all need human connection and belonging, and because of this, even an online classroom can be a beautiful place. Research shows that teachers and staff should strive for more positive interactions than negative corrections with every student. The recommended ratio is 4 positives to every correction, or 4 to 1. Research has also shown that the more you pay attention to behavior, good or bad, the more of those behaviors you'll get. To see more of the behaviors you want, be sure to give praise and acknowledgement to students. Here are some tips to get started. Be free. No-cost rewards are based on strengthening relationships, providing fun activities, and increasing privileges. Because they're free, they're much more sustainable than tangible rewards that drain your school resources or take enormous amounts of time asking local businesses to donate. Privileges and activities deliver more of what kids are after, adult and peer attention. Next, be specific. When you give any positive praise to students, be sure to use your PBIS language. Be safe, be respectful, be responsible, be kind, and then clearly link those shared values to the student's behavior. For example, thank you for showing responsibility by being prepared for class and being on time. Or, that was respectful of you to help your classmate with that. I'm proud of you and you should be proud of yourself. Next, be generous. Don't be stingy with recognition. It doesn't have to be saved for special occasions. In fact, if improving overall culture and connection in your class, it's best to reward routine, positive behaviors because that's the basis for a fantastic classroom atmosphere. Look to reward students for following expectations, attending class regularly and on time, helping others, staying focused in class, handing in homework on time, and more. Next, be random. Believe it or not, this is one area in which you can be inconsistent. When you give points or reinforcements at random, it's called intermittent reinforcement. When there's an element of chance to getting a reward, it creates a stronger response in students, and the positive behaviors are more likely to be sustained than if you were more consistent, like a gumball machine reliably doling out rewards. So remember, you're not paying them for services rendered. Your positive rewards are just a symbol to students that you're happy with them. You're noticing their positive behaviors, and you genuinely like them. Be obvious. Public recognition can be very motivating for students, particularly younger students and adults, sometimes less so for teenagers. So know your students and gauge what's going to work for them. Be fun. We forget that kids are hardwired for fun. We need to be silly sometimes, laugh at ourselves, and value the fun factor more. Positive reinforcement, by definition, must be something that students actually value and want. A menu like the one I share in my blog post, Positive Reinforcement for Your Online Classroom, allows students to choose what they find to be meaningful and fun. In the blog, I have lists of individual rewards, classroom rewards, rewards parents can give their children, and of course, staff rewards. Some of the ideas for individual rewards are students get to wear Snap Camera Lens of choice for class that week, or maybe they can choose the intro music to class for the day. Maybe they share a talent with the class, like playing the guitar, or they can take attendance that day or read a book to the class. What about letting a student choose the teacher's cursor for the day, like a teddy bear or a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, by adding this Chrome extension? You can arrange for them to join their favorite elementary school teacher and help them teach a younger class. The list goes on. And what about class rewards? These are really fun, and students tend to work harder for their class than they will for themselves. Reward a week of perfect attendance or all the assignments being turned in by allowing the whole class to come dressed up in a lens of their choice, like a fairy or a giraffe or even a potato. Have a class game on Friday, like a virtual scavenger hunt. Have a pet show and tell, like a pet parade. What about a crazy hair day or a pajama day with your class? Another good one is that you agree to move your work area to a location in your house or the yard of the student's choice. Try teaching in a bathroom one day. And then there's always the teacher versus students trivia game. Have a video game tournament. What about students reenacting a favorite TikTok video within reason and then showing it to the class? A mini film festival, so to speak. And as a teacher, you could drop into their favorite video game that the students are into, like Minecraft. What about inviting a special guest to join your class? Think of not just the school principal, but maybe your baby or your dog or your next door neighbor who can teach magic tricks. What about your talents? Agree to play the guitar or sing for them or do origami for them. Here's a good one. Agree to show an embarrassing photo like your senior portrait or you with a bad perm in the 1980s. The kids will love it, and it adds so much fun and engagement to your class. And who said only kids need recognition? Watch attendance to your faculty meetings grow and participation increase when you begin to reward teachers and staff as well. You could deliver coffee to their house and leave it on the front porch, have pizza delivered to their house for dinner. You can have a staff member of the week and feature them at the beginning of the faculty meeting. Maybe in your daily email to staff, you can highlight something that an adult at the school did to exemplify one of your school values, like being safe or being kind or being respectful. You could even surprise staff members by having a car wash service come and wash their car. And finally, give parents ideas of home rewards that can reinforce on-task behavior and hard work at home. Most parents would be happy to work collaboratively with their child's teacher to improve behavior. Establish a communication method and a goal, like 100% attendance or all the homework turned in, high participation in class, and then work with the parent to reward the student at home for school behavior. Maybe the child can earn Takeout Friday at the end of the week. The family can pick up takeout food from the child's preferred restaurant if they've demonstrated good behavior, maybe perfect attendance, 80% of their points on check-in, check-out. Parents can reward kids with a later bedtime, go play catch in the backyard, go take a walk, maybe make cookies together, do an art project together, have a game night, a pizza movie night, and let the child pick the movie. Build a fort in the living room. Have a family sleepover in the tent or in the backyard. Parents can help the child organize a Netflix party with their friends. For older students, maybe they can have car privileges or redecorate their bedroom. Feel free to get the full list of rewards on my blog at lauramooiman.com. There's so many ways to add a fun factor in distance learning. By adding these positive interactions with students, it'll improve participation, it'll increase the sense of connection and community, and improve overall behavior and deepen academic engagement. Just for that again, I'm going to give you the full rewards list. So those of you who didn't already do it, I'm going to give that to you right now so you can just kind of browse that. Usually by the time you read a few, it'll give you all these great ideas for your class. All right. Okay. So you have a lot of ideas that can make it really fun. I mean, I have, high school teachers that are doing like DJ time where kids get to earn like choosing all the music before a class starts. I have elementary teachers doing the same kinds of things, doing breaks together. There's so many great ways that you can make that connection with kids. And so it's no longer tangible, right? We're really looking at rewards that we share online, which is a very cool new frontier for us. So here's kind of some of the ideas. Those of you that couldn't read it on the video, but just, these snap lenses are funny. It depends on what kind of device the kids have, but also different kinds of scavenger hunt games. There's a lot of things. And I'm going to share with you some icebreaker games at the end of our session today. So different things you can do. Okay. So one of the things that would be a homework assignment is to develop a reinforcement system that you want to do. So I'm going to actually put you in a quick breakout so that you with another person, you're going to be in groups of 3. And I just want you to talk about what kind of behavior you'd like to reinforce, and then what types of rewards you would like to use, okay? So we're going to go ahead and go into a breakout. And we have, let's get all of these assigned. Okay, we have a 5-minute meeting, guys. Go ahead and head out to your group. Okay, welcome back, everybody. So glad to have you here, back again. And now, just to make sure you're all back from your chat with your colleagues, I want you in the chat box to write 1 or 2 things that you talked about wanting to reinforce, or maybe you came up with a good reinforcer idea. Just your ideas that came up in that conversation or something brilliant someone said in your conversation. Go ahead and fill up that chat box right now so that I know that you're all back. Nice engagement. Good. Okay. And somebody put in something fun that they're going to try to do. Like, what type of reinforcer would you like to do? Oh, art. Juggling. Yay, that's fun. Kahoot. Cool. Nice. What other reinforcement? Virtual lunch, class game on Fridays. Good. Yeah. Get a guest. That's fun. Good. Oh, good. Yeah. It is a fun conversation. That's a good way to make everybody feel more positive, right? To think about positive reinforcement. Good. Okay. Nice. Telling jokes. Good. Yeah. If you have those kids that really like attention and they're always trying to grab everybody's attention, make their reward be that they get to be a stand-up comic at the end of class for like 3 minutes straight, right? They can even prepare all of their jokes in advance. So that's always kind of a nice one to use for kids that love all that attention. Okay, so the next thing that we do when we're trying to build a really effective online class is how do we respond when things don't go well? You did everything and you set up your expectations beautifully. You have a really fun, engaging atmosphere with positive reinforcement. It's still going to be hard. It's hard for kids that normally do well and they're struggling. And then I think all of us have seen there's kids that struggle regularly and they're like blossoming right now, and it's weird. I have one kid that did really well when we were at home, and the other one didn't. It just depends on personality. There's going to be problems, all kinds of stuff. Generally, the issues are falling in the range of like kids not participating is really common, but also really mean or bullying behavior to just flat out waving around a gun. I had dealt with a situation where a kid had a BB gun, but nobody knew it was a, freaked everyone out. All kinds of things are happening, right? This is just a different setup. Parents lurking, getting involved. You guys are dealing with a lot of strange stuff. So it is good to kind of know what you can do. So let's talk about what's PBIS and kind of restorative ways to respond. All right. So that's what we're going to talk about now. So I have a video. We're not going to watch it, but if you go to my YouTube channel, let me see if I can give you a link if I put that in here. Yeah. So I have it here on YouTube. This is the student misbehavior in online learning, and it's entertaining, right? All the things, and I did this one. I recorded it here in the Netherlands. Things that I was hearing right at the beginning with like international students as well. So this is not unique to the U.S. Kids all over the world are doing crazy things. So that's kind of a fun video if you'd like to watch it. Um, so here's the consequences that seem to be working. Okay, the first thing to do would be email or whatever your communication with the kid individually. Some people are actually texting students. That's whatever you're doing. You let them know this behavior I've been noticing, it's been going on. I'd like to talk about it. Now, those of you that have a detention structure, most elementary schools don't have that, but really you just need to set up a private meeting with the kid. Some people are doing this in really different ways. So I have one elementary school, several actually, and a high school where the teacher texts the administrator or like the on duty teacher or, like a specialist, some floater type person. That person comes into the Zoom class or into the Google Meet, and then they break out with the kid, and that person will talk to the kid during class if it's something really big, right? And you can't wait till after class. So that's possible. The other thing that they're doing is having that person come into the class to kind of cover it, if you will, and then the teacher steps out in the breakout room with the student. So that's been working as well. It depends on if you're on Zoom or Google Meet how to do that, but you could talk about it because there's always people at your school that are better at like tech than not, and coming up with a system as a school would be good. If something is happening, what's not okay, and I'm just going to say it now, is to just kick a kid out of your class. That's, and I've not really heard about it in elementary too much, but it's been happening in middle and high schools. And it's kind of the equivalent of like if you send a kid to the office, but there's really nowhere for them to go. There's no paper trail. And these kids are just like not in school, right? And there's nobody following up until it's been happening and finally the teacher asks for help. So that really can't go on. You really need to talk to someone in your school for support if you feel like there's behaviors that I just can't have. Kids like taking off their clothes or whatever's happening. Muting them or turning off their camera is getting to be too much, so much that they're like upping the ante to get attention. We're seeing some of this stuff. A lot of it would not happen, if we got the real clear expectations in the very engaging environment. But basically, meeting with the kid individually first, just you and the kid. Tell me what's going on. I've been noticing X, Y, and Z. Can you tell me more about what's happening for you? And often there's something that needs to be sorted out, like it's technology, it's lack of attention. We've had issues like kids. We had one kid that I was working on, like his parents go to work, he gets dropped off at this daycare, she's taking care of a bunch of little kids, he's supposed to just on his own, get involved and get into the class, and so he's doing crazy stuff, saying bizarre things, dancing, singing, and he's just crying out, right, for more attention. So how can we provide that? Go back to your positive reinforcement list and talk to the kid about how can you provide what they need in a different way. Then the next step is inviting parents to sit with the kid during class, but being really clear on what expectations would be around having them not intrude, being respectful, staying out of the camera line, but they're with their kid. That could be possibly something that you could ask for if it's appropriate. You know your kids and the families. Another thing is if the problem is a wider reaching problem, like you're having a lot of kids coming in late or a lot of kids making unkind comments, you can do a problem solving circle as a class. And those of you that would like to know kind of how to do that, that is like a bigger, more intensive training. But as we do more restorative practices training, basically we talk about the restorative questions, and I'm going to share them with you as a class. And you solve the problem together. And then the last thing is consider adding in interventions and supports for that student. Obviously, if it's repeated and they keep doing it, they need more. And so that's when you're getting into tier 2 and tier 3 needs. So that's kind of what we're looking at, for those sort of steps. And these are things that I think you have to have a response. PBIS is not about not having consequences. It's about having effective evidence-based consequences that actually work, not things that shame and exclude. So if you've tried a few things, they're not working, that's the time to bring your team together, talk to your principal about other ideas, get support with that student that's struggling. I was in a meeting about a kid, and everybody was talking about this student, an elementary student who was struggling, and he was acting crazy, and so it was a tier 2 meeting, and then the parent liaison pipes and she said, actually, the reason he hasn't been coming to class is he didn't have a power cord for his for his device. And all of a sudden everybody started problem solving around, like, how do we get him a power cord, right? And so I think for some students you really need to bring a team around and really begin to look at what do we need to do to fill those gaps. What kind of positive reinforcers can this student work for? What are the barriers to getting online and to learning? And then go from there. But that's what all of these consequences, these steps would lead you to. So you're going to find out we don't need to get more punishing. We actually need to get more support, particularly right now. So that's what you'll get also if you watch that video, a little more detail on those things. And you can always message me if you'd like ideas. My email and everything is I think you have it in your handout. It's at the bottom of the handout and everything. So you can always message me if you have questions about that. So now let's talk about the restorative piece of consequences, because that is sort of where we're going. So restorative practices, we both develop community, like in community building circles, which I'm going to share about in a sec, but they also give you great tools to manage conflict and repair harm. So for example, when we had the student that was waving the gun around in front of the camera, it was a high school student, and it was a BB gun, but nobody knew it. We actually did a restorative circle with first the teacher and then the class after the fact to repair that harm, because it was really frightening, and the kid also was really feeling picked on by the teacher. So we were able to kind of solve it with a restorative response. Okay, so restorative practices really talks about, this is the social discipline window. So if you had any kind of restorative practice training, this is what you're going to see always, is this window. So I want you to think about where you fall in this window here. So you have a continuum of support going from low to high and control low to high. And this is where we all kind of fit when we try to talk about discipline in schools. If you have very low control over your class, and you're not a very supportive teacher, we would call that neglectful or not. So this person is very burned out. This is the person who never talks about school. They always talk about their next vacation or when they're going to retire, right? They're just done. These are the people in the movies, right? None of us actually have colleagues like this, I'm sure. If you are very, very supportive of your student, but you don't have a lot of accountability or control over what's happening, we call that permissive or for. And this is a category I could have fallen into as a school social worker for 20 years, where I was making excuses for kids at times, not very often, but sometimes, because I would know a lot about their background. And then we have the quadrant of two, or punitive. You're very high control, high accountability, but not a lot of like support. So this person is more punishing, more strict, right? And this kind of setting would, sometimes you can get kids to follow those directions, but then they don't bond to you, they keep their distance, and sometimes they'll rebel. And the last quadrant is restorative, and that's with. So what we're looking at is high support and high control. So restorative practices is not sitting in a circle and singing kumbaya. It's actually holding people accountable for their behavior and asking them to make amends. It really is. But it's also at the same time, we're very supportive and empathetic to get them there. So that's what we're looking at with any kind of response to any kind of harm, or they're doing things in class that's distracting or harmful to you, that we would always want to look at how can we be with or restorative. High accountability and high support. So the restorative questions are something you probably, if you've ever heard about restorative practices, these are things you may have seen. And they're going to be the questions you ask when there's been a problem. Okay, and they're the questions you would ask the kid doing the problem, but you can also ask these questions of someone who was harmed by it. So they're not shaming or blaming, and they're really going to be promoting the kid to take responsibility and ownership. And it's going to focus on met and unmet needs. So here we go. The questions are, and in the chat, I'd like you to say yes if you've ever seen these questions before, okay? The questions are, what happened? What were you thinking of at the time? What have you thought about since? Who's been affected by what you did and in what way? And what do you think you need to do to make things right? They're very simple, and I will tell you they are magic. These questions are adapted from very intensive structured conferences that you can do over like horrible like justice cases, where they'll actually walk people through these questions in a circle. But they also can be used in very minor situations, because they're incredibly honoring of everyone's experience, but it also really asks a kid to take responsibility for what they did. So this is the script, if you will, that I would recommend you use if you do have an individual meeting with a kid. Tell me, John, what's been happening? Because I'm noticing, you're not following expectations in class because you're doing X, Y, and Z. Tell me what's happening. What are you thinking about at the time? What have you thought about since that happened? Who's being affected by it, right? In what way? And they're going to need help with answering this a little bit. So you just continue to ask, well, okay, so who was affected? Well, I was affected, they like to say. Well, who else maybe? Well, maybe my classmates, right? You help them get there, but your tone is very with. It's not punitive and two. It's not permissive, pobrecito. It's very with and respectful when you talk to a kid. And then what needs to happen to make it right? So in the situation with the kid that was waving the gun, what we decided was right was he would actually apologize to the class. It was his idea. He wanted to tell them it wasn't real. I'm sorry for frightening you, right? And I'm sorry for, derailing the class for that day. And then he had to do some other stuff to repair his relationship with the teacher. But that's what they decided to do the repair, is what do you need to do to make things right? So when you need to have a restorative conversation with the student, generally you need to set up that time with the kid separately, and then ask the questions privately. This is not something that's going to go well if you do it in front of a group. And when they give the answers, you listen for their feelings and needs, and then you can express your feelings. So restorative practices, it is okay to say that it hurt your feelings, that you worked really hard on that lesson, you were all excited about it, and then when that happened, you weren't able to teach. You just can't do it in a shaming, like guilt trippy way. You have to do it in an honoring way, which is a little bit of a different training. It's called affective statements, but it is okay in this framework to say that you were sad or you were worried. It is, because this is all about relationship. And you want to make a plan together. So I've had kids say, it embarrasses me when you call me out in front of everybody. And the kid and the teacher come up with a code word that she's going to say next time it happens, and then he'll like correct the behavior. So it's not, or a private chat, whatever you agree on with the kid. Believe me, if they're part of making a plan, it's much more likely to work. So those are the kinds of things that people are having a lot of success with. And again, if you need to set up an arrangement where you can step out in a breakout room and have an administrator or a teacher in charge or a colleague come in, I have schools that are setting this kind of arrangements up. So that can happen. So I think because we're running out of time, I want you to think about, we're not going to do another breakout, but think about ways that you're currently responding to challenging behavior, and think about ways that you may want to try something with a restorative approach. And of course, a task is going to be, how can you make that consistent across the school? How can you guys set up a system for this? And as much as we like to say, oh, we're going to be back in school in person just right after Christmas, that may not happen. And I feel like I'm seeing trends of schools just like kicking the can down the street and not making systems for these things because they keep thinking we're going to be back in person. But let me tell you, the more orderly that we can make online learning, the more orderly and consistent when we go back will be. So it's not a bad thing to set up a system like that, even now, even when we think we only have a month left, because we don't know. We don't know if that's true. So the last thing that we want to do, and we have 10 minutes left, right, everybody? 10 minutes, is build community. And like I said, we probably should have done this first because, people, what is it Maya Angelou says, that kids won't remember what you say, what you do, but they're going to remember how you made them feel. That's what community does. Building community is going to get you way further than probably anything. And classroom circles are the easiest way to do that. The positive reinforcement systems are really going to help because if you like laugh together and do activities together, that bonds you as a community. Classroom circles are kind of that restorative way that we build community in classes in an intentional way because we schedule it. It's part of the routine. I would say most elementary school teachers that I'm working with probably have circles every day. Certainly the lower grades do. As we get into middle and high, they're doing weekly circles, even online. Okay. They're also called community circle, morning meeting, class meeting, Socratic circle for the older kids. And you can have a circle and just do community building activities. That's great. You can also do like academic or lesson type circles. Like think about teaching second step or whatever your social emotional learning is. Do that in circles. Problem solving, which I referred to earlier. If you're having a problem with lots of kids doing similar things in the class, you can have a class meeting and talk about that problem. And all you have to do is use your questions, the questions that are in your handout and that I just shared with you. Everybody, let's talk. We're going to talk about some of the unkind comments that are being made in chat, let's say. And the first thing that we're going to ask is, what's been happening? And you let everybody respond. How are you impacted by that? How does it make you feel? And then how do we fix it? That's a class problem solving meeting. It's not that complicated, but it does need to have kind of safety guidelines, things around it. But again, another more in-depth training for that, for sure. What restorative practices really looks at, and that one of the foundational things that they look at is what we all saw in our early childhood classes, which was Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That concept that every human being has physiological needs: food, shelter, warmth, rest. I'd say we all need movement too, right? That's one that I'm like stuck in my house trying to get enough steps. Some of you talked about that. It's tough, right? We have certain things that we need. We also need safety. But don't just think physical safety from harm, but kids and human beings need predictability, order, control, and emotional safety. And research shows that this safety is actually most affected by implementing PBIS. If you can get consistent expectations in your school, it makes everyone feel safe, right? And I'm a social worker, so I wasn't all about the rules until I really understood that it helped kids just flourish because they felt really secure and safe in a school where all the adults talked to them the same way. Everybody would redirect kids the same way. And it just made it a really comfortable place for them to be. They knew the expectations, so they weren't always getting in trouble. And then belonging and love needs is where restorative practices comes in. So have you ever had a situation where your kids will behave for you but not for the substitute teacher? Well, that is because your students, they belong to you, but they don't belong to each other. They don't have an identity separate from you. So by doing classroom circles, they're actually going to bond together and they're going to actually get that sense of identity and belonging and their love needs met, which is a lot to ask. But I have to say that all day long, you guys are being asked to meet these self-actualization needs at the top there, like collaboration and creativity and all these things that teachers are supposed to be doing, yet kids are coming to us with all of these other needs not met. So, how do we do it? We do it with PBIS and we do it with restorative practices. That's the answer. So, doing the things that we're talking about will get the kids to the place that they can do what you need them to do academically. Relationships matter. So anybody that says they don't have time, first of all, any teacher that's been in education long enough, if you interview them, they say the reason they're there is for the kids, which is making this time and age really difficult for people that love their kids. But relationships matter so much that studies show, and this was an Ed Week article not even that long ago, they like evaluated, I don't know what it was, 100 studies, and if you had high strong teacher-student relationships, you had higher academic engagement, better attendance, better grades, fewer behavior problems, fewer suspensions, lower dropout rates, and then the mental health of kids and teachers was better. So that's the remarkable thing. That anxiety goes down when you have good relationships, and then even your well-being as a teacher and anxiety would actually improve when you have good relationships with your students. So that's pretty remarkable stuff, pretty powerful. I want you to know I actually have a video. Let me put it in the link. It's 15 minutes, but it's how to run a circle for those of you that I'm not going to get the chance to train after this today. I want you to have that. So I'm going to put it in the chat to everybody. If you want to watch, kind of those of you that want to take this further and you want to be able to run a classroom circle, that is a how-to. Those of you that want to try it online, what I've been having some success with is making a map of my class. And do I have both? This is like one I made recently. And I actually have these slides for you. Let me put this, it's a template. You fill in your kids' names, and just having them see their names and knowing what order to go in actually can help them to not be nervous that it's their turn next. Does that make sense? So look at the video. Those of you that are kind of my, gifted and talented group, which maybe you are. And then here's a template for how you can try to do this online to create the community that you want. You're going to want guidelines, and so I actually have these on my website. You can download this poster for free. Go to lauramooiman.com, and you can get free guideline posters for your kids. And I have in your handout icebreakers. So these are like fun activities and games that you can do with your kids, either as you do a community circle or even just independently. All kinds of fun things, from scavenger hunts to intro music, that you can try to begin to build more community in your class. If you're feeling like you're missing it, then for sure they're missing it, okay? So you need to feel bonded to those kids because they need you. They need another adult outside their parents, right? Now, also you'll find, so if you go to my website, lauramooiman.com, I have tons of free downloadables. So you'll see the circle guidelines. You put your email in and it just gets emailed to you. A classroom circle planning sheet, so you can make kind of that. I even have some coronavirus ones if you really want to talk to kids and get them talking about how is this impacting their life. And then a welcome back script. So when we begin to bring kids back, we should be processing like what's their experience been. And some of that's because some people have had a wonderful time, very cozy with their families and their parents at home, and other kids, this has been horrible. They've lost housing. I mean, and we need to honor everybody's experience. So that is a great script to kind of use in a circle structure to get that kind of that kind of interaction going with your kids. You have my email address, laura@lauramooiman.com. If you need anything or you have any follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to email me if you need me to send you something. And then I think that some of the videos, if you could go to the YouTube channel, you'll get more if you'd like to see. Feel free to reach out anytime, and have a wonderful day. Thanks, everybody.